Hi folks, and welcome back to Broadside Gaming with me, Zug. So, I know it's Tuesday. We've missed Monday's build. I'm very sorry for that. I'm swamped at the moment, so I'm going to try and get builds out as quickly as I can, as much as I can, but it's going to be a bit spotty for the foreseeable future. There is stuff happening on the channel, so do keep tuned for that. But for the Darktide content, I will try my hardest. And saying that as well, I will point out that also Darktide has been a bit of a disappointment recently. Fat Shark seem to be concentrating solely on Vermintide 2, which is a weird decision. I mean, some of the stuff they've done is really cool, but Darktide is supposed to be their flagship game, and it's kind of feels like it's just been left on life support. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I would like to see a bit more done with the game, because at this point it just feels like we're just rehashing content, and that's not fair on you guys. I want to be able to bring new and exciting stuff to you, but if Fat Shark just decides to not really do anything apart from the odd in-game event, air quotes, to kill a certain number of things in a certain way for crafting materials, I mean, it is what it is though. So with that out of the way, we'll jump into Psyker week. We've had Zealot, Oghren, Vet, and it's now time for the Psyker. As I said, these are going to be a bit shorter than usual, but I will try and get as much out as quick as I can. So anyway, let's jump in. As you can see, it is Psyker week, and we're going to start off with some classics. So this is the Palpatine staff, but this is the electric staff. I hate that they've renamed them, because they're stupid. But anyway, weapons. Let's start off with the Blaze Force Sword. More specifically, the Demios Mark IV. This is one of my favourite Psyker swords. It's insanely good and really, really good for cracking those heavier targets. So we're going to take a look at the modifiers. We're going with damage, finesse, first target, and warp resistance at 80, and mobility is our dump. And at this point, mobility is a dump because I just think it's a pointless stat on these weapons. Yes, dodging and all that later on becomes important, but I mean, it's just you want a weapon to do damage, so that's why that is my philosophy with them. If that's not yours, then fair enough. Perk wise, we're going with Carapace and Maniac, so that we can deal with those dastardly crushers, maulers, and ragers. And you might say, so what are you talking about, ragers? Ragers do have Carapace armor on them. Somewhere. Alright, there's a spot on them that's Carapace. I can't. There we go. One of them. Anyway, because they're classed as Maniac as well, Carapace is going to help you cheat through them. But because we've also got Maniac here, we can deal with those Ragers quite easily. And for the Crushers, well, that's when we charge up the sword. And we can strike them in the head pretty easily. But also, we're using the Demios because of deflection. Now, let's jump in and we'll talk about deflection. As you can see, the blessing-wise, Uncanny Strike's one of the best talents to use. It requires very little input from you apart from hitting weak spots, and it jacks your damage up to crazy amounts. Now, Deflector. What it does, this weapon blocks both melee and ranged attacks, and additionally block cost is reduced by 30%. So you basically can block being shot, which is very important because the Psyker is very squishy. So that is how we are building up the melee weapon. I know I haven't maxed it out to 500. I mean, I've run out of resources, and my ability to care anymore is very low. Darktide has hurt me. Anyway, for our main weapon, I don't know why the secondary, but it is our primary. So it is the electric staff, and for this we are going with damage, warp resistance, charge rate, critical bonus, and quell speed is our dump. This weapon does, well, that's exactly what it says on the tin. It electrocutes people, and it's a fairly decent staff, to be honest. It's pretty good at everything. It's not amazing at one thing, but it's a pretty good all-round staff. So for the perks, we're going with Carapace and Maniac, again, to help deal with the main issue targets. As you can see, the main attack is a little snipe. It's not super great, but I mean, if you have to try and take out something at a long range, it is there. But mostly, the main charge attack does actually do quite a lot of damage, and it's got a pretty decent AoE on it. It's not massive, but during those tight situations, it is good enough to try and take out 3 or 4 enemies. So that's the perks. Blessing wise, we're going with Warp Nexus. It's very old school choices here. Warp Nexus gain between 5 and 20% critical chance based on the current level of peril. We're always going to be quite high on peril anyway. And Warp Flurry, minus 8.5% charge time on chained secondary attacks, stacking 3 times, which basically means the staff is going to charge incredibly quickly. As you can see down the bottom, that is it charging up. So it's almost instantaneous once you get to high levels. And also, what makes them explode? I think it's a crit kill makes them explode. I did work this out in one of the other videos. I mean, it's in the comments somewhere of why I think it's a crit kill makes things explode. If I'm wrong, put it in the comments. But you know. And as for the curios, we're going with 2 twinned toughness curios with toughness, combat ability regeneration, and damage resistance gunners, because gunners are the biggest threat to the Psyker. They will shred you almost instantly. And the last one is stamina. And this is going to also have a toughness, combat ability regeneration, and damage resistance to gunners. This is just going to help us blocking and dodging, really, as it gives us a few more pips. Okay. So this is just going to allow us to be a bit more survivable. And as you can see, they've all got damage resistant gunners and combat ability regeneration, because who doesn't like a good combat ability regeneration, especially with this one, which is the force push, which also allows us to vent a lot of perils. So that's going to be rolling very, very quickly. Right, let's jump in and take a look at the talents. As I said, this is a very old school build. So let's start off with metal. Critical hits replenish 5% toughness, and also grant 5% increased movement speed for 4 seconds, stacking 3 times. Then we're going to Soul Stealer, replenish 7.5% toughness on warp attack kill. Into Quietude, replenish 5% toughness for each 10% of peril quelled. Into Perilous Combustion, killing an elite or specialist enemy applies 3 stacks of Soul Blaze to nearby enemies, causing damage over time. Soul Blaze is not quite as good as Bleed, but it is still very, very good, because at this point in the game, Bleeds and Soul Blaze and that sort of thing, and Infernus are quite up there in the meta, because they don't suffer from the diminishing returns like a lot of damaging attacks do. I know Bleed is currently the king of this, but Soul Blaze is up there as well, which is why you will see Perilous Combustion and a lot of other like flamey things, Soul Blaze, on builds. Then into Battle Meditation, 10% chance to quell 10% perils on kill. Sorry. There we go. Right, anyway, toughness boost. Into Smite, unleash a torrent of Biolightning, a fast channeled attack that locks to and stuns an enemy while dealing damage. This spreads to nearby enemies, charge to increase spread rate and damage. And then we're taking the tertiary ability, Lightning Storm, increases the number of times your Smite jumps. So there is a few things you can do with this. Obviously, you can use it to lock down enemy waves and things. It does quite a nice bit of damage, but also don't forget, you kind of want to let go of this before it just stops itself automatically, because if you let go sooner, you actually force push and stagger things. But if you need to, obviously you can just stand there and do it, but if you let go sooner, you push things about and stagger. But as you can see, it does do quite a bit of damage. But try not to hit your peril cap while you're doing it. It won't kill you, as you can't overcharge yourself with this, but you don't get that stagger at the end. Right, next up. Peril resistance into wildfire. When an enemy dies while affected by your soul blaze, nearby enemies each gain up to 4 stacks of soul blaze. They cannot gain more than the stacks of the dying enemy. Psyker's aura decreased the ability cooldown for you and your allies' incoherency by 5% on elite or specialist kill. Toughness damage reduction into Seer's presence. Plus 10% cooldown reduction on abilities for you and your allies' incoherency. This is an augmented version of the quickening. One with the warp, gain toughness damage reduction of 10 to 33% based on your current perils. As I said, we're going to be running quite high perils with this, but we do have Venting Shriek to protect us from accidentally overcharging. So unleash a wave of energy that staggers enemies in front of you and quells 50% peril. Base cooldown is 30 seconds, but as you can see through the tree and our items, we have a lot of cooldown reduction. So it's not going to be 30 seconds. Becalming Eruption, Venting Shriek now decreases peril generation by 1% for each enemy hit, stacking 25 times. That's alright. And then Creeping Flames, Venting Shriek applies 1 to 6 stacks of Soul Blaze to targets hit based on your current peril. Now, this is the big thing, which is why we are also going to be stacking peril quite highly. Because we can take advantage of the fact that we can actually just apply Soul Blaze throughout our normal rotation of just keeping ourselves alive. And as you can see, Soul Blaze is it's pretty decent at just whittling down enemies. It's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. It's not going to do huge, massive chunk damage, but it is going to help whittle down and keep a nice steady stream of DPS on everything that is currently on the board. Which is why Bleed and Soul Blaze, Infernus, and things like that are so popular. Not to mention the damage reduction that they don't get hit with. Peril resistance, minus 5% peril generation into Solidarity, increase quell speed by 30%. Toughness damage reduction, and into Empiric Resolve, minus 40% peril generation and 30% toughness replenishment. So this is basically allowing us to do more and control the build easier. Because I know we want high perils, but we don't want to be at high perils instantly. We want to be able to plan out when we're going to be dropping it and how we're going to be doing it. Then over here into critical chance boost, and then into kinetic deflection. While below critical perils, blocking an attack causes you to gain peril instead of losing stamina. This is just pairs up very nicely with deflector. Gained peril is 25% of the block attack stamina cost. And again, this is just going to be a nice way of dealing with when you do get overwhelmed in melee, because it will happen. There is very little way to avoid that. You can't predict every fight. So with deflector and that, it gives us a lot more survivability for very little input. And now through the middle for the 10% health boost into Warp Rider, deal up to 20% damage increased as your peril increases. Into a toughness boost, and then we're taking Empowered Psionics. Kills have a 7.5% chance to empower your next blitz. So we're looking at Smite. Empowered Smite does 200% more damage and 50% faster spread between enemies. Now this is going to make Smite a pretty decent damaging ability. Now I'm not saying you need to stand there and just smite continuously, because that is going to annoy people. You need to know when to smite and when to actively damage. You don't want to be one of those psychers that just stands there and does nothing but smite, because that really isn't helping anyone. You can affect the flow of battle with smite. It is a very, very good ability. But like with the Ogryn Slab Shield, doing the special and just standing there, you're not helping anyone. You might think you are, but you're not. So with the Psyker, you've got to see it as you have a bigger toolkit. You have your ranged, your melee, and your blitz, your smite. And there is a time for each one of these things. And learning when to switch between them is kind of the whole point, really. I mean, after a few games, you will learn the ebb and flow of when to use it, when not to use it. And next up, we've got Overpowering Souls, guaranteed chance to gain empowered psionics on elite kill. And last but not least, Charged Up, you can now hold up to 3 stacks of empowered psionics, which generally makes your smite just that more deadly. You can see, it does do quite a bit of decent damage. But so does your staff and so does your sword. Don't fall into the trap of only using one of them. You have a wide and varied toolkit. Take advantage of that. Anyway, that is the very, very classic Psyker build. And I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, please do like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. It really does help us out. And I shall see you all for the next one. So until then, take it easy, and I'll see you later.